Hey guys, David here. I wanted to make a video regarding shading today. I recently got a question on how to shade and what that means. And so I've been thinking about how to approach that question because it might be a lot deeper than people think, and that's probably why they call it shading. Because what shading actually is, it's applying a gradient to a two-dimensional image. So let's say we have like a circle, or a square. Or even let's say a face. And you might say, okay, now I've drawn the lines. I either did it in my sketchbook or I used a Kopialine page and I drew lines. What's the next step? So what can I do? How do I shade it? And it's really a difficult thing to almost describe because shading, what it really implies is this. It's this motion. It's doing this, right? That's shading. Shading is just putting a lot of graphite down. So this is in fact shading, as far as I'm concerned. It's simply coloring in a shape. And I think what people really mean is drawing form. So it's actually drawing three-dimensional objects. So picturing this as a sphere rather than just a circle. See, this is how you shade a circle because a circle is two-dimensional. But how do you shade a 3D sphere? Or let's say a box that's in 3 dimensions. Right? How do we then shade that? Or even this face. Is this face just lines in 2 dimensions, or is it actually a 3-dimensional face? So yeah, you could shade it with, let's say the mouth is open and you want to have the top teeth there and the bottom teeth there. Well, all this could just be shaded. That's fine. Shaded implies, I think, that there is a darker value to something. So here, I'll show you. I made 3 little objects, and I'll turn my page over just to help. And here we can see 3 objects made of clay. Now these aren't 2-dimensional anymore. These are 3D shapes with proper shading. So now we can start to define what shading really is. Shading, or drawing, how do I say it? Drawing shading on an object is illustrating its 3D form with light, which is over here, and shadows. And so actually the goal then is not just to shade things, it's actually to draw the light and the shadow. To do that, you kind of have to understand what 3D form is. So this is a sphere. Next to it we could draw the 2D equivalent, a circle. So in this case, thinking of this as the reference, you can kind of see how to draw the shading on, right? You see the light sources here, so we don't want to draw much over here. And we go around, leaving this circle because the light source is picking up the highlight right here, and it gets darker as it goes down here, right? So let's just do that. And I don't want to make it too deep because it does get deeper. I'm leaving this a little bit white down here because you see that little bit of white? That's actually the light from this light source hitting the paper, bouncing up onto this part of the ball and lighting it up. So this is the basic shading of this, or you could say the shadows. Then you have this shadow underneath, which is the actual ball getting in the way of the light, creating a shadow. So shadow and darkness on objects really is where light can't really reach. That's a really big part of it. So there you go. That's a very rudimentary way to do it. And having little objects like this to play with is great because as you move them, you can see it changing. This one I made just so you can kind of see how that works. You see it'll go from light up here to like dark here because now all of this is in the way. So this is called form. So how do we apply that to something like this copiographic page? How do we start thinking of this as three-dimensional? And that is a hard thing to answer. Having objects like this with a light source, it can really help. Because you take something like this eyeball, for instance. This eyeball, you could say, is in 3 dimensions. So getting a little closer, if I look at the shading on the ball, and I consider that this eyeball is a round object, then I can simply dictate or depict it in the same way. So I'll do the line work first. I'll follow the colored shapes. You know, in copiography, the colored shapes are a drawing guide. So it kind of tells you where to put the lines. So there you go. Now let's apply this lighting. And this lighting will work because actually the sky is the light source here. So it'll be lighter at the top of the eyeball. Now going slowly and practicing this stuff is pretty important to doing it well. You may have to do it a bunch before you find you can do it very well. And let's just continue. I'll see how would this apply to other areas. Because rabbits, just like other objects, 3D objects, they're three-dimensional. So they all have form and they all are affected by light differently. And this actually is one of my favorite parts of drawing, is figuring out the light and how it works, like how it might interact with what it is I'm drawing, or painting, or rendering out. So there we go. Okay, so the light source is up here. We get that. So I'm going to go ahead and consider that the nose has some roundness. I think the way this is on the face, this kind of hair, it's not on the top. It's more like here. So this would be the top of this form. This is like the top of the ball. So each round object, each area where it kind of curves gets treated in a similar way to the eyeball. Now there's other things that happen. So this hair might actually be blocking the light. And you'll notice if I take something, see if I can do this. Here's this card. And I block the light. Now there's a harder edge in here. And you can see it more on the paper almost. This light's a bit diffused, so it's not going to do it very strongly. But a direct light source, you would have this edge blocking that light. So I think that's what's happening with this part of the hair. And that's just because that's what I want to happen. I like the way that looks. This part I'll consider to be round. So I like this style where I use lines to kind of curve it. And I'll go back in and I'll darken them up as I see fit and see if that helps. See if it makes the object, makes the form actually pop a bit more. there you go. It's starting to look relatively nice. And you could say that's shaded. I'm doing shading, but really all I'm doing is thinking about the form. And I'm letting the form actually tell me where some of this, you could say, shading should go. So additionally to that, what I think you should think about is a value scale. So here I have a few pencils, and they go from light to dark. And that's what happens in an object like this. It goes from light to dark. And so that's a good way to practice. You take, let's say, your darkest pencil. You could use the others if you want. These are all Prismacolor, but you really might try to have a range of just different softness of lead with a graphite pencil. So with this box, now I'm just going to try to go from very light, which is white, to completely black. And this actually is something you usually practice in school. And I'm holding my pencil way down here because I just want this side of my pencil. There's more surface area that way, so you get this kind of maybe softer. Here, I'll do an example here. That's kind of what you're getting, a wider, I think wider displacement of material. And so now I'm going to go back over it. I'm holding it a bit different, so I'm getting a sharper point down. And I'm not really trying to be too accurate here within the lines. I'm really just focusing on the level of darkness and see how the gradient ought to go. It should be a nice smooth gradient. And this is pencil color, so you can get there. It's not going to be as dark as some pencils can go, and especially charcoal. And there you have it. Now that's a proper gradient. This is where the light would be hitting, and this is where no light is getting to something. So if we look at our bunny again, our rabbit, and we see in here, I assume not a lot of light is getting in there. Just like in here, not a lot of light is getting into that nostril. So that actually can be quite dark. In here we can do the same, a little bit of darkness. And you know, you'll come across areas and you're like, will it be darker here? I don't really know. Sometimes you have to really think about it. Sometimes it takes time to process those things. And that's really what rendering is. Rendering is like you're using your computer, your noggin, your understanding, your ability to reason. So I think working on things like this will make you more observant, you know, if you work at it, so that you'll notice the things around you and how the lighting is affecting them. You know, it's something that took me a long time to develop in my own thinking, but once it kind of clicked, it was like I couldn't stop seeing it. It was everywhere. And it really just helped my drawings become that much better. So that's my video on shading for the moment. You know, let me know if you have any questions, and I'll be happy to do more. So yeah, happy drawing.